I wrote over 1,080,000 words of fiction between 2013 and 2024. That's over 4,300 pages in total. As you can see by this breakdown here, the vast majority of those words were in the fantasy genre. And thanks to all that writing, I've now published 4 fantasy books, an interactive fantasy novel, and a bunch of short stories as well. And while there have been many habits that have helped me reach this milestone, there's one habit in particular which I would credit with the majority of my success. It's incredibly simple and it only takes me a few seconds to do each day. But it's so insanely effective that sometimes it just tricks my brain into writing even when I don't feel like it. To understand the power of this habit, we first need to understand the psychology behind how to harness effortless motivation as a writer. And the secret here lies in video games. When I was a kid, I loved Pokemon. In fact, the very first story I wrote was a Pokemon fanfiction. I wrote it with my friend because we thought we were going to create the next Pokemon game together. So of course, it was my job to create the novelization tie-in. What's really interesting about games like Pokemon is it becomes incredibly fun to do the tedious, boring work of just running back and forth in the long grass, trying to find wild Pokemon so that you can battle them and level up your own creatures. And just repeating that grind over and over again. But why are video games so good at tricking us into enjoying mundane tasks? It's because of the science of gamification. You just get into this immediate reward loop. Every time you defeat a Pokemon, your own creature levels up, you see the stats increase in your stats bar, and you feel this sense of progress, rewarding you with a spurt of dopamine. Yet if you cross over to something like writing a fantasy novel, it can take years before you get to the point of being rewarded for your efforts with something like publication. That is something that for many people takes many years to reach that point. The time horizon when it comes to writing is long. And as a result of that long time horizon, sometimes it can be very difficult to summon motivation for you to write on a daily basis. So how can you trick your brain and give yourself motivation to make it easy for you to be writing? Here's the answer. You want to bring forward the reward of writing as close into the present as you possibly can so that you are developing a much faster reward feedback loop. And that's where the habit that this video is all about comes into play. So here is the habit. Since 2018, I have tracked my daily writing in a spreadsheet. At the end of each day, I note down what project I worked on, how many words I wrote for that project, and how long I spent writing. If I'm doing something like outlining my story or editing, I also track that as well. I've set up my spreadsheet so that it automatically calculates how many days of the year I'm writing. It gives me an attendance percentage. So an attendance of 100% means I've written every single day for that year. Since I've started tracking, I tend to average in around the mid-70s because sometimes life gets in the way or you go on a trip and I tend to have a little bit of a break between projects. But for the most part, I'm quite happy with that number. This literally only takes me a few seconds to record my progress in this spreadsheet, yet it is so insanely powerful and effective for my process. Why is this such a powerful habit? Well, over the 6 years I've been doing this, I've discovered 3 main reasons why having a writing tracker is so useful for me. And once you understand all 3 of these reasons, you'll be able to also harness the real power of a writing tracker to supercharge your productivity as a writer. I should also mention, if you want the exact writing tracker that I've developed and refined and tested over 6 years, I've linked to it in the description down below. I've also given this tracker to many of the writers I've worked with in my coaching programs, and I've always seen it make major improvements to their productivity and to their writing efficiency. Now, the first reason why a writing tracker is so powerful is what I call the Seinfeld Rule. Jerry Seinfeld once told a young stand-up comedian to get a big wall calendar, and every day that he wrote to mark that day with a red cross on this calendar. Here's why Seinfeld said this was so useful. After a few days, you'll have a chain. Just keep at it and the chain will grow longer every day. You'll like seeing that chain, especially when you get a few weeks under your belt. Your only job is to not break the chain. You might think that writing an entire novel is a very daunting task, but if you just break it down to trying to write 2 crappy pages a day, around 500 words in total, after 7 months, you will have a completed first draft of 100,000 words. The key though is in building a consistent daily writing habit and not breaking the chain. There have been so many times where it's the end of the day and I'm tired, but I haven't done my writing for that day. And I just can't bear to break the chain I've developed. So I open up my manuscript and I resolve to just give myself 10 minutes of work on this thing. And sometimes that's all I do. I just do 10 minutes of work and I feel good for not breaking the chain. But there have been many instances where that 10 minutes snowballs into half an hour, a full hour, maybe even longer. And before I know it, I've ended up with all these bonus words I never would have had if it wasn't for my writing tracker spreadsheet tricking my brain into doing some writing for the day. The other great benefit of daily writing, even if it is only 10 minutes a day, is that it keeps your story lodged in the back of your mind. I find that when I'm writing every day, I am so much more likely to get great ideas for my story when I'm away from the desk. The second reason why a writing tracker is so powerful is what I call the one-up principle. What gets measured gets managed. When you're tracking your daily word counts, it's very easy to see what your personal record is, what your PB is for the amount of words you've written in a day. Maybe up until this point, the most words you've ever written in a day is 500. Okay, great. Now that you've got that down in the spreadsheet, you're very quickly going to reach a point where you feel motivated to beat that, to one up your former self. Can you take that 500 words and do 600 words in a day, 700 words, maybe even 1,000? Can you get it up to 2,000 even? Now, there's this idea that quality and quantity are sometimes opposites. And you might be thinking right now, oh, well, I'm reluctant to try to write heaps of words because the words might be bad. My experience, and this may be different for you, but I do find this with writers that I coach, is that the faster I'm writing and the more words I'm getting down in a day, the better the writing tends to be, because the more I write, the more into flow state I get. I become less inhibited. I become more creative. And many times, the words I write in this sort of white hot rapid speed tend to be the words that need the least editing and that are the best in the final manuscript, because they just come from a place of the story channeling and flowing through you. Personally, I tend to average around 1,500 words a day when I'm writing a first draft, although using the writing tracker spreadsheet, I've been able to look back and the personal record I've set was actually at the start of when I was writing the Thunder Heist, my ocean punk pirate heist story. And there were 2 days at the start of this project where I wrote 8,000 words over the course of those 2 days, which was, as you can imagine, an incredibly awesome day for my writing. I do want to stress at this point here, it is not about you comparing your daily word counts to me or anyone else that you see in the writing community. It is simply about using the writing tracker to try to improve on your former self, even if that is only by a couple of words every day. Which brings me to the third reason why a writing tracker is so powerful, and maybe this is the best reason to be using a writing tracker if you're not already convinced. I call this the belief booster. You do not gain confidence by shouting affirmations at yourself. You gain confidence by having an undeniable stack of proof that you are what you say you are. Every single day that you fill out your writing tracker, you are reinforcing your identity as a dedicated writer. Over time, this identity solidifies within you to the point where writing just becomes an ingrained and inherent part of your life, something that brings you a tremendous amount of joy and meaning and purpose and fulfillment. And as a result, it feels easy to show up each day and move your story forward. So to those of us committed to the craft of becoming the best storytellers we possibly can, to you I say, keep writing and keep striving. I'll see you in the next video.